You're comfortable right now. Probably don't think about it, but there's warmth all around you. A thermostat somewhere keeps the temperature exactly where you want it. And if things get a little chilly, some system kicks in automatically before you even feel it. Your whole day happens inside heated spaces, buildings, vehicles, rooms, and the most uncomfortable part might be those brief seconds walking from one warm zone to another. For you, winter means inconvenience. Maybe de-icing your windows, throwing on an extra layer, wishing sunset came later, but rewind the clock far enough, and winter was something else entirely. It was the part of the year designed to kill you, and it attacked from multiple fronts simultaneously. Freezing temperatures could end it all, starvation could end it all, predators could end it all, and the relentless darkness could break your spirit long before any of those other dangers got their shot. So ask yourself this: how did anyone manage to survive the coldest months without central heating, without supermarkets, without walls that actually stopped the wind? Because they did. Your forebears walked straight into brutal climates and lived to see spring, and the strategy they developed to accomplish this ranks among humanity's greatest achievements. Let's tackle the most obvious danger first: freezing to death. Something that catches people off guard. The human body evolved for warmth. We're built for tropical conditions, and when you strip away protection, we lose heat fast in freezing air. Hypothermia sneaks in within hours. Your extremities stop working properly, your mind gets foggy, and once your core temperature drops below a critical threshold, your systems simply fail. We've got no natural armor, no dense fur, no biological insulation worth mentioning. Among large mammals, we're spectacularly poorly equipped for enduring harsh winters. And yet, humans didn't just barely scrape by in the cold. They charged right into it. They migrated northward during ice ages, pushed into Siberia, settled in places where winter temperatures plunged far beyond what an unprotected person can withstand. How'd they pull it off? The obvious piece is fire, and we'll get to what fire meant for those endless dark hours soon enough. But fire has limitations. It warms whichever side faces the flames. It doesn't follow you around. The second you walk away to track game or collect more fuel, the chill comes roaring back. Fire alone would never be sufficient. What people required was a method to carry warmth with them wherever they moved, which leads us to perhaps the most crucial winter innovation our species ever developed: proper clothing. But not the kind you're probably imagining. For ages, the standard thinking went like this: cold outside, so you throw some animal hide over yourself and you're done. And initially, that's exactly what happened. Except a skin draped across your shoulders leaves everything else exposed. Wind sneaks in from every angle. Your limbs are out in the open. The whole thing slides around and falls off when you're active. A simple pelt is better than bare skin, but in real winter conditions, better than nothing still isn't enough to keep you alive. The breakthrough came when people figured out how to cut hides into pieces and sew them back together into forms that actually fit the human frame. Closed sleeves, sealed seams, a garment that trapped a layer of warm air directly against your skin and kept it there no matter how much you moved. That's the difference between wrapping yourself in a blanket and wearing an actual coat. But here's the thing: making this work requires a needle. Not just any sharp stick, a needle with an eye, a tiny hole for thread. This is genuinely difficult to manufacture. You take a sliver of bone, file it down to a sharp point, then drill a hole through it small enough to be precise but strong enough not to break. Archaeologists have found bone needles like these going back more than 40,000 years, and some evidence pushes even earlier. These aren't crude attempts. They're carefully crafted instruments, and whoever made them understood exactly what they were for. The thread came from the same source as the hide. Sinew, the tough tissue connecting muscle to bone, could be extracted, dried, and used to bind pieces together permanently. Stack a garment like that with the fur side facing inward, and suddenly, a person could stand in lethal cold and stay warm inside their own portable heat envelope. Sewn clothing wasn't a nice-to-have. It was the tool that allowed humans to leave the temperate zone where we evolved and colonized the planet's most frigid regions. Without the needle and thread, there's no surviving an Ice Age Siberian winter. Simple as that. All right, so you're insulated now. You can move around, do work, track animals. But daylight's fading, the mercury's still dropping, and problem number 2 appears that no garment can solve. You need somewhere to spend the night. The default answer is a cave, and caves absolutely played a role. A deep cave maintains consistent temperature, blocks the wind, keeps precipitation off you. But here's what gets left out about caves. They're rare. A good, dry, defensible cave in a useful location was hard to come by, and if you found one, odds are someone else had the same idea. You couldn't rely on finding shelter. Most of the time, if you wanted protection from the elements, you had to build it from scratch, and this is where things get remarkable. At a place called Mezhyrich in what's now Ukraine, archaeologists discovered the ruins of structures built around 15,000 years ago. The surrounding area had virtually no trees and virtually no stone, so the inhabitants constructed homes from the one material available in abundance: mammoth bones. They assembled and locked together the skeletons of dozens of mammoths into circular, dome-shaped buildings. Hundreds of bones in a single dwelling, jawbones layered like roof tiles, massive tusks curved over doorways. These weren't quick emergency shelters. They were serious, intentional architecture, designed to withstand a punishing winter, and they took real coordination and serious labor to put together. Inside structures like these, everything centered on holding heat. Floors got covered. At a South African site, researchers discovered evidence of bedding made from carefully arranged layers of grass and leaves, dating back an astonishing 77,000 years. People were making their sleeping areas comfortable long before our species had even left Africa, and the work didn't stop at ground level. Think about that mammoth bone shelter for a moment. Bone doesn't fit together perfectly. Gaps exist everywhere, and every gap is an invitation for wind. So people sealed them, layer upon layer. They draped animal skins across interior walls and secured them over openings. They cut blocks of turf and stacked them against exterior walls. Some groups even packed snow up against their homes, because a thick snow layer is actually an outstanding insulator. It traps air pockets, and trapped air holds warmth. Gradually, the wind ran out of entry points. A shelter stopped being just a structure. It became a complete system, and it kept people breathing on nights that should have finished them. But a well-sealed shelter creates its own fresh challenge, and it's a big one. Maintaining a fire through a long winter demands fuel, massive amounts of it. And collecting fuel means somebody has to keep venturing back into the cold, repeatedly, all season long. You're tethered to that shelter. You can't just roam freely, which means the food you need has to either be nearby or already put away. Which brings us to threat number 3, and probably the most lethal: starvation. Here's something modern existence has completely erased from common knowledge. In winter, the landscape stops producing. Plants wither or go dormant. Berries disappear. Roots become nearly impossible to extract from frozen ground. Many animals have migrated, hibernated, or grown thin and scarce themselves. For a hunter-gatherer, winter isn't just cold. It's the time when the earth quits feeding you, and that makes survival a math problem. You have to collect enough during warm seasons to sustain your entire group through months when almost nothing new becomes available. So ancient people became experts at food preservation, and they came up with several ingenious techniques. First was drying. Cut meat into thin strips and let it dry, whether in sunlight or over low fire smoke, and you remove the moisture. Without moisture, decay can't happen. Dried meat stayed good for months, and smoke provided an additional preservative effect beyond just the drying. A rack of meat drying in autumn was, practically speaking, a community's guarantee against late winter famine. The second approach was using cold itself as a resource. Frozen earth functions as a natural freezer. Dig a pit down into permafrost. Fill it with meat from a successful hunt, and the cold preserves it for surprisingly long stretches. Winter, the very thing threatening to starve them, became the mechanism preserving the food that kept them going. But the most valuable winter food wasn't meat per se, it was fat. When your body's burning enormous energy just maintaining temperature, lean protein alone won't cut it. Fat is the most concentrated energy source around, and in deep winter, it was more valuable than almost anything. Ancient people rendered animal fat into a stable, storable form, an energy-dense fuel for the human system. They mixed dried meat with fat into a compact, durable ration that packed huge calories into something small and portable. In a season where every calorie mattered, fat meant the difference between a group that made it to spring and one that didn't. So you've got warmth, you've got shelter, you've stockpiled provisions, you've defeated 3 of winter's 4 death sentences. But there's a fourth, and it's the one almost nobody thinks about because it doesn't target your body. It targets your mind. the darkness. In winter, particularly the farther north you go, days contract and nights expand severely. You might get just a few hours of workable daylight, followed by 15 or 16 hours of cold blackness with nothing to do but wait. You can't travel far. You can't hunt effectively without light. You're stuck in a confined space with the same small group of people for months on end, night after night after night. And that kind of confinement, that constant waiting, can erode a person in ways cold and hunger never manage. But here's what ancient people did with those extended dark hours. They didn't just endure them, they used them completely. This was the time for every job that didn't need daylight or decent weather. Sitting by the fire, fixing tools, shaping new spear tips, repairing garments for next season, twisting plant fibers into cordage, carving. The long night wasn't dead time, it was production time. The hours when a community prepared everything it would need, the instant conditions improved. And it was more than work. Around that winter fire, in the darkness, is where people spoke, where elders transmitted everything they'd learned to the young, where stories got repeated, the same narratives over and over, carrying a group's memory and wisdom across generations. A huge portion of what we call human culture, the myths, the songs, the collective knowledge, was forged under exactly these circumstances. In 2014, researcher Polly Wiesner published findings examining nighttime conversations among the Jiu Huansi in the Kalahari, discovering that after dark, discussion shifted dramatically away from practical topics toward stories, music, and ritual. Firelight itself seemed to alter what people felt comfortable sharing. People huddled together against darkness, keeping each other warm, keeping each other sane, keeping each other human until dawn returned. Winter didn't just challenge the body. In an odd way, it constructed the mind. And when you step back and examine the complete picture, something remarkable becomes clear. Winter didn't merely get endured. Winter transformed us. Think about it. The threat of cold is what drove people to create fitted, sewn garments. The scarcity of caves is what drove them to develop genuine architecture. The seasonal food shortage is what drove them to invent storage and preservation. And those long, dark nights account for a huge share of where culture itself was forged. Nearly every tool that enabled our species to inhabit every climate zone on the planet was developed in the fight to survive freezing seasons. The planet's harshest time of year didn't just fail to eliminate us. It made us far more resourceful than we had any business being. So here's the full account. Winter came at your ancestors with 4 weapons. The cold, and they countered with fire and with tailored sewn garments. The exposure, and they countered by building shelters from whatever materials the landscape provided, even mammoth skeletons. The starvation, and they countered by drying, freezing, and rendering food into reserves that could sustain a community for months. And the darkness, and they countered by transforming the longest, coldest nights into the forge and the school, where human culture itself took shape. Every winter was an exam that many people didn't pass. Making it through was never automatic. It was achieved each year through preparation, knowledge, and absolute determination. And now, look where you are. You adjust a dial, and temperature changes. You open a refrigerator, and there's produce grown halfway across the globe in the middle of December. You complain about early sunsets from inside a dwelling your ancestors couldn't have conceived, having never once experienced the particular terror of watching the first snow arrive and questioning whether you'd stored enough to reach spring. You don't survive winter anymore. You barely notice it. And that's not because winter became any kinder. It's because 100,000 years of human beings, freezing and starving and clustering together in darkness, gradually figured out how to defeat it, one innovation at a time, so you'd never have to.